David and Geeta, welcome to this conversation, the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. You know, these three crises are really affecting Yemen and Thailand, and we'd very much like to know how it's impacting the communities that you serve, and what are the solutions that your country team is bringing. David, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a real pleasure. I think the most significant threat to, particularly on the biodiversity, but also the pollution in Yemen, is really the conflict itself that's been waging for the last 8 years. It has put much at risk. Yemen is blessed to have the island of Socotra, which is one of the rare ecosystems in the world that's been threatened by pollution from oil tankers. We have wildlife that has been reduced. The Red Sea itself, a pristine environment that's unique in the world. All of these have suffered during the conflict. I was very pleased, though, when I was recently asked to speak at the League of Arab States Summit of Environmental Ministers about 3-4 weeks ago, where we were able to announce both the UNEP coming back, the UN Environmental Program coming back, and they're going to do a post-conflict analysis of the environment. And the ministers were quite pleased with that. And equally, UNESCO has been focused particularly on the pollution aspect. So UNEP more on the biodiversity, UNESCO more on the issue of pollution, including that there's like 17 oil tankers that have sunk off the shore that are threatening all of the waters. So I think we're in a good position to help recover the biodiversity, limit the pollution going forward as the conflict winds down.
Mm-hmm. And Geeta, what do you see as the challenges and what are the solutions that you bring with your team?
I want to begin, Lygia, by thanking you for creating the time to talk to us and for even helping us push boundaries when it comes to climate and biodiversity. I want to speak from the context of Thailand. We've got a government that is committed to accelerating climate action, including biodiversity. We've also got a private sector that is stepping in, supporting biodiversity and committing to protecting 30% of the land and water resources in the country, which provides us with a very solid foundation of taking the whole agenda of biodiversity in Thailand. I believe biodiversity impacts everyone. It impacts the vulnerable much more than others. If I have to speak to identify two groups, farmers, very impacted just because it impacts yields, directly impacts agricultural yields. It also impacts ethnic minorities, people living or dependent on forests and forest produce in many ways, right? In terms of solutions, there are three things that we, as the UN system in Thailand, are doing. Firstly, we've got UNEP, together with FAO, that are working on organic cultivation. And UNEP specifically working on rice and seeing how we can make paddy fields. We can introduce sustainable rice production to protect the biodiversity of paddy fields, which helps obviously reduce resource use and even emissions while enhancing agricultural yields. Your analysis, UNEP's analysis tells us that if you increase organic cultivation of rice by 10%, only 10%, it will translate into returns of over 400 million in 15 years, right? So that tells you the positive impact that this can have. The second thing that we are investing in is sustainable tourism. Community-based approaches, bottom-up approaches to protect species, to protect biodiversity hotspots, together with UNDP, UNESCO, working with the hotel industry, together with Expedia, through the Sustainable Travel Pledge, to protect these biodiversity hotspots.
Indeed. Now let me also push you a little bit on your climate change work. I know you're doing fantastic work. So what are the pathways that you're using to support an accelerated climate action in Thailand?
Lygia, there are 3-4 areas that we prioritize as a country team. The first is obviously introducing best available technology in polluting industries, including transport, that account for a significant proportion of the GHG. And one of the lessons that we are learning here is the minute you introduce clean technologies, best available technologies, it tends to get scaled up by private sector itself. And we've seen that in action in Thailand. The second area that we prioritize, and this we do together with the provincial governors who've committed to climate action, they are taking waste segregation to 14 million rural households, helping us not just reduce carbon emissions, but translating that into carbon credits, which then results in increased investments at the local level. The third area of priority is our dialogue with the bankers, investors, and asset managers. And this is important, and this is where, the work that UNEP does, you people provide us with the entry points for this dialogue. The UN Principles of Responsible Banking provided us with the entry point to bring the banking community together. In the context of Thailand, this is huge. They represent $1.3 trillion in terms of the asset base. In fact, one of their recommendations to us was to dialogue with the government to see how to increase the supply of green and sustainability-linked bonds, which the new Prime Minister picked up and has committed to issuing sustainability-linked bonds, which will help generate close to $2 billion of additional financing for the green transformation. Going to pause here, hand it back to you, Lygia.
Very good, excellent. David, let me come to you with regard to biodiversity, and especially the UN has recently removed the oil from the tanker, the FSO Safa. What do you think has been the impact of this project on the biodiversity avoided losses of the Red Sea?
Well, it's one of the more difficult things to do is to prevent a disaster as opposed to respond to one. That's what we discovered in this whole process. We needed to raise over $140 million to carry out this project, not a small amount of money, but the stakes were extremely high. Our estimates that came from UNEP, in fact, about $20 billion would have been required to clean it up. $140 million is not much compared to $20 billion, so the business case is easy. The environmental impact would have lasted a generation. Pristine waters that include some of the most unique coral species around, including those that are tolerant to warm temperatures, high temperatures. We may need it in the future. We're also at stake. Fishing communities, 200,000 fishing communities, not communities, families would have lost their livelihood. Probably 25 years of loss of biodiversity in the southern part of the Red Sea. That's what was at stake. There were also economic issues, shipping issues, humanitarian issues, access to ports. Frankly, the shipping through the Red Sea represented 86% of the national income of the country of Djibouti, because they depend upon shipping for national revenue and for their own support to biodiversity locally. That was all at risk, because if you can't get through the Red Sea, there's no point going through the Suez Canal. So everybody had a stake, economic, ecological, humanitarian, economic, it was all there, and still difficult to find the funding. And in the end, we did a three-prong approach to this. I just want to share a quick story with you. To get to the funding, of course, we talked to member states, and we got considerable funding from them. We also talked to the private sector, particularly the oil and gas producers, but also those who are major food importers, and they put in considerable money. But we also went out to crowdfunding to bring in the global public as well, because we believed that this was a global challenge that required a global response. Yeah. And we got quite a bit of support from individuals as well. And the story I want to tell you is a really nice one. One of the groups that contributed to us was a bunch of school children in Bethesda, Maryland. They were 6, 7, 8 years old, and their classroom teacher had organized an environment club. And they went out and raised several $100s selling lemonade. Even some of them used their money from the tooth fairy, they described.
That's amazing.
So you get this global movement of everybody from corporate oil companies, member states, down to, I shouldn't say down, but including children who want to contribute to prevent the same problem.
Fantastic.
I'm
We'd
very
love
happy
to
see
know
it.
more. Thank you so very much.
My
This
pleasure.
is great, and thank you for being here, both of you, to this chat.
Our
Yes.
pleasure, yeah. Thank you so much.